All right, betters. Today we are going to be taking a closer look at a secret UFO crash site that Diana Pasulka and Gary Nolan went to, right? Back in 2017, as described in Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic. You see, they were taken there by a gentleman named Tyler D., right? That's how he's known as a pseudonym in the book. Of course, his real name is Tim Taylor. I made a deep dive video about that I released yesterday. If you haven't seen that yet, please go check it out. People seem to be enjoying it, so I highly recommend that. But we're going to be kind of digging apart this one particular aspect, the secret UFO crash site that they went to in New Mexico. That is, as Diana puts it, not Roswell. Right, but I've got a lot more information about that, and we're going to kind of dive into that today. All right, so here's a clip of Diana most recently talking on the Blurry Creatures podcast about this trip. Again, 2017, secret UFO crash site. She's blindfolded, taken out to this site with Dr. Gary Nolan, Stanford professor, right, by NASA mission controller Tim Taylor, the most mysterious man in UFO history, takes him out there, and here we go. And that was my dog barking because apparently he is also interested in this.
You're at a crash retrieval. You're looking at the pieces. You're touching stuff. What's going through your mind then in terms of your faith?
Yeah. So Tyler, this person, enigmatic person who is affiliated with all these government institutions, has the clearances. And so he takes Gary Nolan and I. Gary is a professor at Stanford, a scientist. And we go to this. And by the way, I invited Gary because I didn't want to go by myself. So we go to this place.
You don't want to be blindfolded and somewhere by yourself?
I did not.
Yeah, that's probably a smart move.
Yeah.
We had to be blindfolded. It's a secret place. So it's in New Mexico. It was a crash site from apparently one of the ones in the 1940s, not Roswell. And so at that point, I'm not believing. I'm not believing that it's real. I think that maybe it's a setup. Maybe they're trying to plant disinformation. Gary's on my side. Yeah. We're both academics, and so we both kind of talk to each other as the day goes on, and we do find debris. We're like, is this a setup for us? And Gary's like, well, I'm the one who's going to assess these materials, and we'll find out. Right. And I was like, yeah. So anyway, so we got the stuff, and it looks like metallic frog skin. So everybody asked me, what does it look like? So it looks like metallic frog skin. And Gary's going to take
big pieces, small pieces?
Big and small pieces we found. Really? And it wasn't easy to find, by the way. It was underneath rubble and buried, like really deep. And the rubble, by the way, this is why I'm really grateful to my then self for taking good notes, because the rubble was important because I didn't understand it. Tyler told me that it was disintegrated cans, aluminum cans from the 1950s. After they excavated the craft, they didn't want anybody else out there looking for this stuff. But my editor of the book is my Oxford editor. So she said, this is weird, Diana. You can't put this in there. Like, why would there be rubble out in the middle of the desert? And I said, well, you're right. It is weird, but we have to keep it in there because we don't know.
All right, so a few things here. One, I think Diana's first sort of instinct that this is some sort of misinformation or, right, sort of planting information. I think your first instinct is typically right. You'll see as the story unfolds that I think she should have really listened to that initial instinct that, her mind, her body, her spirit, her energy was trying to tell her about this person, Tyler D. Tim Taylor, right? Because Tyler and Tim, Tyler Tim, he is not just a, NASA mission controller. He's also part of other 3-letter agencies, right? Just very strange. And yesterday I found out someone had pointed out that Tim Taylor is an anagram for mortality. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Again, I'm not sure that Tim Taylor is his real name. I don't think it is. I really don't. Anyway, more about that material later in this video, okay? More about the material that they found, because I made a video last year, this time almost roughly last year, about Gary Nolan denying part of Diana Pasulka's story. We'll get to that in a moment. And, you know, also Gary, you know, explains the results of this material that they took from this crash site after he tested it, right? So more on that in just a second. But let's hear more from Diana about this, you know, materials, frog skin materials, right? Frog skin-like materials, which this is something that's always interested me that no one's ever asked Diana, which is who told her that it looked like frog skin? Did she use that terminology first? Who said that to her, right? Because it's an odd description to give, right? Frogs look differently. I don't know about you, but I've been around a lot of frogs. You know, I'm a frog whisperer. I'm just kidding. You know, that sounds weird to say. I've been around a lot of frogs. You know, I'm just saying I've seen a lot of frogs. You know, I've played with frogs. You know, that also sounds weird. I'm going to move on past that, but I know what frogs look like, and they're all kinds of different frogs and skins and whatever. So it's just an interesting choice of words, right? Who chose that? But regardless, here's more of Diana talking about these materials.
You're seeing it.
And
You're holding it.
do you have to dig? How far? You going 10 feet down, 6 feet down? How far down do you go to find these pieces?
Yeah, so Gary goes down, it looks like 3 feet down.
3 feet down.
So he spends almost all day at this one rock because Tyler had configured the metal detectors to identify this stuff.
Interesting.
You
Cut
know,
out the
he knows
noise.
what he's doing.
Yeah.
What kind of metal is it?
We don't know. Well, they're anomalous. So according to Gary, who then comes back and says to us months later, you know, I've done the initial look at these and they're so far
But it's setting off the
anomalous.
metal detector.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's looking for a certain type of metal, I guess,
Yeah.
and knows what it is.
It's like an alloy, probably.
And I don't know, as a non-scientist.
Is it light? Is it?
The metal?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super light. It's super light.
Is it like-
And it's...
What's the biggest piece that you guys found?
So probably the biggest piece was probably like this big.
Size of a Subway sandwich?
Yeah.
like bigger than a VHS?
Yeah, bigger than a VHS. And then we found a bunch of small parts, and there were some other types of things too.
Wait, a couple questions. What other type of things did you find out there besides, was it pieces of some other stuff?
Yeah, no, it was apparently part of it, but it didn't look like the frog
was
skin.
different.
It
So you're
looked
saying
like something
frog
different.
skin. You're saying it's wavy, it's got texture, or it just shines that way?
It's wavy. It has texture like bumpy,
Yeah.
you know, like frog skin has. And like if you took a frog and you took his skin off, that's
Yeah.
what it would look like. But it was
Weird.
metal looking and kind of dark metal.
When did you do this again?
This was in, let's see, probably 2017.
Wow. So pretty recent.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
still out there.
And that busts your paradigm, right? Because you're at this point, you said you weren't really a believer. You were just sort of chasing
Yeah.
this narrative.
I mean, yeah.
And
well,
then you're like, I'm holding this.
I knew that there was something there that was substantial, but I didn't believe it was what I was going to find out.
Right.
And also part of it was the context was that Tyler was bizarre. Like he could go, he didn't have to go through TSA at the airport. You know, I mean, so many weird things about that guy. And so he told us what would happen to Gary once he got through the airport. So we had to take this stuff back, right?
Yeah.
And so I say, I'm not taking it. You know,
Put it
I'm
in
not
your
going to
bag,
take
Gary.
this. Yeah, I did. I said, you take it, Gary.
Give it
You're
to
going to
Tyler
analyze
Durden
it.
and let him take it through here.
Yeah. And so Gary's like, I'll take it. I'll take it in my backpack. So Tyler said, okay, this is going to happen to you, Gary. You're going to get stopped. And don't worry, though, you'll get it. They're not going to, even if they find it, they're not going to know what it is and they don't care. But whatever, it's going to be tagged and flagged. And so you'll probably be known. And Gary's like, I don't care about that. And so, but he was sweating when he went through the
Really?
airport.
And
yeah,
they
it all
stopped him?
happened.
And they
Yeah,
stopped
it
him
all
the same
happened
way?
exactly. So Tyler sailed through. I go through TSA. Gary goes through TSA, gets stopped, you know. And I'm watching and I'm afraid for him, frankly.
Yeah.
And then I get out and Tyler's just hanging out there with his glass of water.
And Tyler has some of the craft and Gary has some of the
Gary
craft.
has all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why wouldn't Tyler carry it if he could just go through
Yeah.
TSA? He didn't.
I have no idea.
Interesting.
Yeah,
He just breezes through. Just take it with you, pal. Put it in your laptop bag.
And that question there at the end by that gentleman that's one of the co-hosts of the show, great question, my man. Great question. And by the way, link in the description. Please go check out this interview. It's a phenomenal interview. And the set of this podcast for these guys is, I'm super jealous. What a great setup and a great set for a podcast and their show. You know, very nostalgic. I love it. I mean, just great job to those guys. I'd never heard of this podcast before. Great, shout out to those guys. Great setup, great questions, great conversation, very open-minded, very just kind of, I loved it. It was a really, really good conversation. So I highly recommend going to check out the full podcast. I'll put a link in the description. It's well over an hour long, almost 2 hours, well worth watching. Diana's a great speaker. I want to just say that first clearly here, that I like Diana and I support her. I would love to have her on the show and talk to her more about this stuff. So that's my goal this year, is to try to get Diana on Vetted and see if we can, ask some more pertinent questions. But that question that this co-host asked at the very end, right? Why doesn't Tim Taylor take the stuff through airport security, right? If he gets a pass through TSA, why is he making Gary take it? Hey, you're going to get flagged. They're going to know about you. Why don't you take it, dude? You can walk through it with the materials, right? Very suspicious. Red flag, huge red flag. Again, going back to Diana's initial instinct, right, that there's something off, something going on. She should keep that in mind, because this seems off, right? And why wouldn't they ask that at the airport? Why wouldn't Diana or Gary ask that? I mean, that'd be the first thing I would say if Tim said to me, this guy says to me, hey, they're going to flag you if you go through it. Dude, well, you take it through. You go through airport security with it then, bro. You ain't even got to take off your shoes. You take the UFO material that we just discovered at a secret UFO crash site that you took me to that isn't Roswell from New Mexico in the late 1940s. Right? Why do I got to take it through? Why do I have to be flagged? Why do I have to be put on a list? You take it through and then give it to me on the other side. Why wouldn't they box it up and send it? Box it up and send it to your facility, your lab. This is so strange. There's something off about this in every way. The fact that Diana or Gary also is weird. Why wouldn't they ask him that in the moment? It's almost like Diana's like, oh, I never thought of that. What do you mean you never thought of that? That's also strange to me, right? And maybe they did ask and she doesn't remember. It's been almost 10 years. But that's definitely a great question, right? One that deserves an answer. One we'll probably never get an answer for. But again, huge red flag. It's almost like Tim is testing them. There's always a test. There's always something going on, something mischievous. I wouldn't trust that crash site and the materials found there for anything. One, Gary cannot, or Diana cannot confirm that those pieces were not set there by Tim or other people like Tim, right? They have no idea. Right, you just go and you find this stuff, right, and then they peppered it with aluminum cans to cover up the UFO material. I mean, come on, right? Look, what I found out, right, about all of this is that through other videos that I've made, and interviewing Grant Cameron, for instance, one of the first questions I would have asked Tim Taylor if I was Diana is, how did you find out about this crash site that you're taking me to, that you have to blindfold? But how did you find out about it, right? Well, it turns out that Tim has been saying that, his family has been taking care of it for decades, right? And that it got passed to him, and he's just the next caretaker of it, right? Which is why he has to keep it secure. But that's not true, right? It turns out, according to other people in the community, that Tim had gone to this experiencer meeting up in Canada and learned about it from someone else, right? And then was taken to the crash site about 4 or 5 years earlier from taking Gary Nolan out. So somewhere around 2012, I believe, right? Somewhere in that timeline. And he finds the crash site then. They took him to it. Other people knew about it, right? And they took him out to this crash site. And then he basically adopts the story. No, my whole family's, been taking care of this, which is BS, right? And if it's not BS, then it's just cloudy and murky and nobody knows what's going on, right? It's why have all these different stories, right? It's like Tim found out about this crash site from other people. He wasn't even the first one to go there. This is where like arts parts and all that stuff comes from. It's just it's so shady. It's crazy, to be honest with you, right? And there's always something else behind whatever this Tim person says. Always something strange behind it, right? He lies. I mean, he just straight up lies about stuff, right? So I find that very concerning. And how can you trust the materials you get from there? Right? I wouldn't even trust it, because as we'll see here in this next clip, Gary talks about what the findings were, right, of studying this material, right? That Gary is saying he took it through airport security, right? And he's taking it back to his lab to test it, right? And the results are this.
And you spent just one day digging for this stuff?
Yeah.
And you found
the
all
whole
of that.
day.
What is Gary?
Yeah.
What is Gary's conclusions then once he gets it back to the lab?
So again, he at this point, and I checked this before I went on the Joe Rogan podcast. I checked it with Gary, so I texted him and say, "Okay, I'm going to go on Joe Rogan. What can't I say or can I say about this stuff that you found?" And he said, he just said it was anomalous, and he said that we found anomalous that. Of his stuff, he found anomalous stuff that's been found at a place where people have seen a craft. So are they related? He can't say.
Sure.
Right? But
it's a very scientific answer. Something we can't explain that was found at a place purportedly where there was
associated
with a crash.
Exactly,
any serial numbers on there or any writing or anything?
No.
Okay, so it's anomalous metal, right? Well, it just so happens that a metal detector set to just the right settings that Tim Taylor knows can find these UFO pieces, right? I mean, it's just, whatever. So Gary takes it back, right? Now I get it. He's saying he dug it up from the ground, but he has no idea where the origin comes from. And he's not making that claim either. He's just testing the material on his own. And he's saying it's anomalous, whatever that means, right? I don't know what that means. It's just I don't know what it is. And it's coming from a place where supposedly a UFO crash happened. But again, you cannot trace the origin of how that piece got there. Sorry, you can't. Because as Tim Taylor explains to Diana, this was in an episode of The X-Files. That's why it looks familiar, this particular place, right? Well, I looked into that too months and months and months ago. Turns out that's not entirely true, right? He's saying they had an insider on The X-Files. Okay, but The X-Files shot in Canada, right? And we've determined, a lot of other vetters and stuff, there was only a few episodes that this could have been where they showed a crash site, a UFO crash site. And the one that rose to the top as people believing it to be the one is actually just sort of TV trickery in the sense that, they shot in a quarry in Vancouver. Okay, I looked this up. This scene where it has the UFO in this X-Files episode. They have this UFO in a quarry, right? They make this crashed UFO. Well, it's in a quarry in Canada, not New Mexico. And then what they did for the background, what they call background plating, they inserted the background in post-production. That is from New Mexico, but not from that area. And it's kind of mixed different background. They mixed in to add some mountains and different stuff. So the actual location doesn't exist. It's not even real. It's just made up. So that's what I'm saying. Tim is always just sort of implying or leading that there's something else, and it's not. It's all BS, in my opinion, right? But why? Why set up this secret crash site to bring these people out? It's just a test. It's weird. It's playing with them. I don't get it. It's so strange. I wouldn't trust any of it, right? It's just so strange. But to say it's anomalous, right? Okay, that's fine, right? But again, why doesn't Tim take it through airport security? He wants Gary. It's all set up. It's all set up for Diana. It's all set up for Gary. It's all, who knows, right? But what's even more interesting, right, is when Diana went on Joe Rogan, right, last year, and she even calls Gary and says, hey, I'm going to talk. What am I allowed to say? I'm going on there. Okay, they talk about it. After that interview comes out, and I made a video about this. I'll put a link in the description. I'm about to show you a clip, right? Gary Nolan basically denies part of Diana's story after that Joe Rogan interview. Why? If they talked about it beforehand, right? And most specifically, the frog skin-like material and the characteristics of what Diana described this material doing, right? It's just so strange. I don't get it, right? Nothing seems to add up. And if you want me and other people to sort of believe in this, I think we need some more answers. That's the bottom line, right? So real quick, I'm going to put 2 links in the description. One, if you want to find the full story of Diana talking about this secret UFO crash trip that she took out with Tim, because there's way more to that story, y'all. So much more, so many red flags. I made a video about it. One of my more popular vetted videos ever, to be honest with you. So I'll put a link in the description, and then a longer version, the full video of this next clip that I'm about to show you. But here is, me talking about how Gary denied part of Diana's story last year when she went on Joe Rogan. He tweeted and asked Nolan, right? Kept the piece that unfolds, right? That frog skin, that's what she was talking. No. He's like, no. And then another Twitter guy, Xer, UAP dog, asks, Dr. Nolan, if I took that metallic piece and crumpled it in my hand, how long would it take to straighten out on its own once my hand was open? Nolan, forever and never. Sorry to disappoint. But did you hold a piece with those characteristics? Never. So that's interesting. Why is he denying, Gary Nolan, why is he denying Diana's story, essentially, right? That part. Because again, Diana never took any materials. Gary Nolan is the one that took all the materials home, right? And what's also interesting is during the interview, Diana mentions how she called Gary Nolan to verify some of the stuff, like to go over some of the details of the story before she went on Joe Rogan, just to make sure she had everything in line. And I'm like, they wouldn't have discussed that, the frog skin stuff, right? That sounds interesting. So, why, what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of denying? Is it because he's not supposed to have it, so he just has to deny it publicly? And maybe he told Diana he would deny it publicly. I don't know. But then why would Diana come out and say that I spoke about it? Again, it just creates smoke and mirror, cloak and dagger. Like, what is going, confusion for what? For what purpose? Right? Forget transparency. We can't even get transparency from, the people going out and looking into this. Right. We want to complain about the government not being transparent, man. I'll tell you what, all these people making claims are also not transparent. It's very hard to find out what the truth is. And then they want us to vote for legislation to get passed. They want us to buy books. They want us to, buy, whatever, invest in their nonprofits and invest in their companies and teach their own. Right. But I'm going to tell you what, it's not going to go further than the small UFO community bubble unless those things get answered, because your diehard UFO alien fans who believe all of this stuff, they will dismiss. They will boop, 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 red flags, gone. Don't worry about it. I know it's true. So blah, blah, blah. But the majority of human beings on Earth need more answers. And that's why it'll never go past, the first couple steps. We'll never go past the first floor, out of the lobby, you know what I mean? Up to the penthouse where all the real shit is. Because there's all these roadblocks, questions. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense, and you want answers to that before you're willing to go further, right? That's generally how it works, right? So I don't know. I'm just saying, again, I'm left with more questions than answers. So again, I hope I am able to get Diana on this podcast, because I would love to have just a wonderful conversation with her about many other things. Again, I enjoy her work. Her books are great. The last two, American Cosmic and what was the last one? Encounters. Oh my God, I'm probably getting that wrong. It's probably wrong, but I have them on audiobook. I don't know why I can't remember that last one. They're great. And she's a great speaker, and I love listening to her. And I just have more questions because I feel like she's been deceived, right? And maybe she knows that, right? Maybe she does know that. I don't know. But regardless, let me know what you think in the comments. Again, I don't know about you, but I'm more confused than ever. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like going down into a cave, and the further you get away from the light, the darker it gets, right? And the more you can't see what's going on. You would think the deeper in you got, the more you would see, but that's not how it works. The deeper you get, the further away from reality you are, right? And the light. So anyway, all right, y'all. We'll see you guys on tomorrow's video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.